Okay, so this is a test because I want to do a podcast. I do. But I want guests. I feel like I do better when I'm conversing with someone, but I'm going to try a solo act just to see how it goes. The name of this podcast I think I'm also going to have to get over some stage fright, or I have, if you're into this, I have 5 Capricorn placements in my astrology chart. So I struggle a bit with perfectionism. So I'm going to have to get over that and let the pieces fall where they may. The name of this podcast, as I say it for the first time, is On Some Deep Shit. We're on some deep shit because I want to cover things like, I want to definitely focus on spirituality, but also psychology and how those intersect and intertwine. Because while we are multidimensional spiritual beings, this is my belief and understanding, we are also in human bodies and do have brains with neural pathways and different makeups chemically and all that kind of stuff. So we do come from a place of brain stuff as well as spirit stuff. So your brain is like necessary to receive the spiritual stuff. We're a mind, body, spirit complex. So the body is important for the mind to connect to the spirit. And so I'm not sure. I guess I'm going to start with my story of how spirituality came unto me, because everyone has a different experience. Some people are very spiritually connected from birth. They have gifts when they're children. They may even be gaslit into thinking they're crazy or just embarrassed by them. I know I have a friend who shall not be named for privacy's sake, but he sees aura, and he's seen aura since he was a child. And he told me a story about how someone's aura was fucked up, and he was like a kid, and he was like asking some other kid, he said he was like 8 or 9, like, don't you see like what's going on here? Like, she's so spiky, or she's so this or something, like what he was seeing. And the other kid was like, what? And he said that's when he realized this might not be an everybody thing. This might be a just him thing. And he pushed it down and tried not to ever talk about it, which is sad because he sees it all the time. It's not a conscious decision. He actually said that he wished he didn't have it because he felt like he got too much insight on what people were feeling. And unfortunately for him, what I learned was he would use it to interpret people's emotions, but he was not very good at interpreting them. Just because he could see aura didn't mean he could understand where someone was coming from or what emotion they were feeling. He just saw the energy field and how it was reacting, but he could not really interpret it. But he believed he could, and he would often gaslight us into telling us that we didn't know how we felt because he could see it. So these gifts can come in ways that we don't expect. Or like for me, my gifts and my spiritual awakening didn't come until I was 30. It started when I was 31, and then it really hit. I went into a deep space when I was 32. So that's 3 years ago, 2022. So like everyone's journey is different. Everyone's awakening is different. And it's not ever just one awakening. It's like almost like just an expansion of awareness that really can, the first bits of it hit very hard because it's tearing up the very foundation of everything that you thought you understood about reality itself and yourself, because everything is the self. So once we understand ourselves, we get a much better understanding of reality around us because we're spawning that reality based on our beliefs about it and ourselves. So my journey was one of, I was an atheist, agnostic, all my life. When I was a child, my parents were Christians, but they were very loose Christians. I think they just did it out of like shame. Like they didn't send me to church, but they wanted me to believe in God because I think they thought that it was the right thing to do. And if I didn't, then they had failed in some way, or someone would judge them or like say that you didn't raise your kid right. I don't know. But around like 8th grade, I actually like developed like the conscious awareness to like question it. And I was a very scientifically and logically minded child. And I was just like, this doesn't make sense to me. I questioned them about Santa when I was about 7. I was like, how does he get around the world that fast? That doesn't make sense. No one can do that. Like, I would always just think like, what is the logical, like, what the fuck? And I channeled something once that was like, we do not live in an uncaring universe. Only if you believe it to be so will it show itself that way, because the universe is a mirror. So since I had seen it as an uncaring being, just random chance, evolution, dead except for us, like that's what it was showing me. And when I got into psychology, I felt a pull to look into psychology after I heard one specific quote on I don't know why I felt pulled to watch this YouTube video once. It was on my suggested, and I was like, it tingled something in me. It resonated, but I didn't know what that was at the time. And the person said, everything that anyone has ever said about you is an opinion. And that shook something deep inside of me about the trauma that I had about my parents and my stepmom and people I knew when I was younger, and just like how I had gotten shit on when I was younger, and how I wasn't accepted for who I was, and how I didn't receive unconditional love, and how I was just kind of the victim of projection. And I don't like saying victim because self-victimization is a block for growth and it's giving your power away, but I was subjected to a lot of invalidation, and so I didn't know how to validate myself. And so when I saw that video, it really jostled something. And I had never really felt safe around people because I didn't understand how they worked, because it didn't seem like they worked the same way as I did. So people were kind of scary to me. I was afraid I wasn't going to know what I was going to say. I was afraid I was going to be socially rejected. I was afraid of my own feelings because I would feel rejected. I would feel bad feelings. And then I would want that not to happen because I already felt deep down like I was not enough. So it triggered those feelings, and then it would really feel bad. So I started studying the human psyche and why we are the way we are and why we think the way we think. And narcissism was the first thing that started coming up for me. I followed this wonderful YouTuber, Dr. Ramani. She specializes in narcissism, and she's very informed. She's got doctorates. She's written books. Like she's good on it. And that made my parents make more sense to me, because I didn't understand why I was told that I was loved, but I did not feel it. And when I said I didn't feel it, then I was told I was wrong. And then it made me second guess myself, second, third, fourth, fifth guess myself. Like I didn't trust myself at all, because I was told over and over again that my feelings were wrong and that I was not interpreting the situation the correct way. But as it turns out, my stepfather had a lot of narcissistic traits. I'm hesitant to call anyone a narcissist because that's an identifier and a label that comes with a lot of things attached to it. And it gives people the opportunity to deny it, and just, it's too much. I will say someone has narcissistic tendencies or narcissistic traits, because that's solely focusing on their behavior, not who we perceive them to be as a person. So my stepfather had a lot of narcissistic traits and did not know how to give or receive love. He always felt, at least in his behavior, it seemed like he always felt like he was doing so much. He supported my mom. My mom couldn't work because she was very mentally ill. And later I learned, I was like, oh, she ticks all the boxes for borderline personality disorder, which is kind of like a segue. Like they're both personality disorders. I believe type C personality disorders. I may be wrong. It might be type B. I forget. But, and they share similarities where narcissism is sort of like the fight response to it. And the protection of the ego surrounds a core of insecurity. So these people deep down think that they're pieces of shit, but their conscious mind will not let them see that. It overcompensates and makes them feel like they're top of the world. But that those people are the ones that are easily triggered when you say something that makes them seem like they're not the shit. Then they're the ones that rage and belittle you and do all those things because their ego is trying to protect them from the fact that you're right. And BPD is more of the like a freeze and fawn response version of it, where they self-victimize, they get into relationships with narcissists, they are very anxiously attached, where narcissists are usually avoidantly attached, and they're very self-hating, and they have a lot of abandonment issues, where narcissists will probably have abandonment issues, but only because it's a control thing, where they want to be the one ending or starting the relationship and keeping you wrapped into them. So anyway, that was my parents. And so my stepdad took care of my mom, he took care of me, but he felt unappreciated for it because he hated his life, he hated his job. He was a drywaller, he got paid under the table. I think his boss's son got a lot of favor, even though he didn't do nearly as much work, and he would bring that anger home and project it onto me, sometimes onto my mom, but I was the easiest one, I think, to do it because he loved my mom. And I don't doubt that he loved me in some capacity, but I don't think he knew how to love, so it wasn't, I always felt like they got married when I was 2.5, and they were like best friends, and they were like, well, I guess we got to get married. So it felt more like a trauma bonded survival system than like a loving family. And I always felt like I was kind of this extra thing that he had to deal with. So it gave me a very big burden complex in my mind, which I carried until very recently, that I had to work through that and see like my value as a person. But so long story, but, that was the opening of psychology for me to understanding my parents, and then understanding why they treated me the way they did. It was actually projection. And then I learned about projection. I'm like, oh, they actually felt like shit about themselves and knew they weren't being very good parents, but their egos had to protect them. So they had to project onto me that I was the one fucking up. And if I was just a calmer child that worked harder and listened and was just better, quote unquote, then we wouldn't be having these problems, and I would receive the love that they would give me. But instead, it was a lot of withdrawing love, not withholding love, yelling at me, and stuff like that. So when I got into that, I kind of delved deeper and deeper, And then I was kind of learning about emotional intelligence and processing, and then I learned about trauma. And there's a beautiful book that I bought but I did not read, but I've read a lot of things that come from the book. So admittedly, I did not read it because I have trouble committing to reading books. But it's called The Body Keeps the Score, and it was a breakthrough piece on how trauma is stored in the nervous system in the body. Because when we don't process and feel it in our bodies, when we dissociate and go into our minds because our minds perceive it as too painful, it gets repressed in our nervous system and in our mind. So in our mind, we're not even aware of it anymore, because now it's just going to manifest as subconscious behavioral responses to triggers that we're not even aware of, until we get into a situation where the response that we have is disproportionate to the trigger. And that's how you know it's like a backlog of emotion. But to process those emotions, we need to go into our body, bring our awareness, because we are conscious awareness. That's like what we are. We're not our bodies. We are our conscious awareness embodying this body, navigating it. We bring our conscious awareness to our bodies, feel those uncomfortable feelings, let the narrative play in our heads without trying to attach to it. And it's very hard at the beginning to not attach to the narrative, because that is often when we start this stuff, we believe we are our thoughts, and we believe we are our feelings, and that they are real. And not that they're not real, but they are distortions of our experiences. They're distortions that filter our experiences, filtered through our emotions and our personal beliefs and our senses, obviously. But when we have these distortions from past experiences that we have not processed, then that kind of fucks up how we're recording reality now. And we filter it through a very maybe possibly pessimistic view or fear-based view, where things are out to get us, things aren't working out because things haven't worked out before. So we buy into that narrative by looking into the past, because it's very logical-minded and evolutionary for us to look into our past and say, well, that happened 3 times before, so it's definitely going to happen again. And spirituality kind of brings you to the realization that those things, the past does not exist anymore. We just carry it with us because we haven't processed these things and opened ourselves up to the possibility that these limitations are not concrete, and that we can remove them and experience things in different ways and internalize them in different ways. So the psychology stuff opened me up to the fact that I don't really know how I work. I didn't know how I worked. And when I got into Carl Jung, he talks about something called the collective. There's the personal conscious, the personal unconscious, the collective conscious, and the collective unconscious. I think I'm mixing that up a little bit, but I know there's a collective unconscious, and I know there's a personal unconscious. And I think the personal conscious is actually just the ego. But the collective unconscious, he says, is an ancestrally encoded connection to everything that human beings have ever experienced and learned. Like how we you see like a stick on the ground or like a wiggly thing, and like innately you're like, oh, because like your brain's like a snake. But like that's been encoded over years and years of evolution for us to maintain safety. But it intrigued me because I'm like, well, what if consciousness doesn't exist in the brain? What if it exists in somewhere else? And like that seemed crazy to me, but also like there was something pulling me about it. And I got into a bit of quantum physics because something that always interested me was the double slit experiment, where basically particles, electrons when shot at this sheet of paper or something that like showed where they landed, when it was unobserved, they would act as waveforms or potential without collapsing into a particle. So they existed as a probability of landing here or here, and then blah, blah, blah. When they were observed directly, they acted as a particle, something that has collapsed into something, and showed a pattern based on that, which made me question, is the universe like aware? Like if we observe something and it changes based on something that we don't deem to be alive or aware, like an animal or something, what the fuck is that? And so I started going into scientific studies that would propose that the universe is conscious, kind of like we're a cell in the universe's body, and it's all part of a system, and greater awareness comes from greater complexity of life. And that, when that started resonating, now I realized what that was. It was me deconstructing limiting beliefs about the concrete nature of reality and opening up to the malleability of creation, because it resonated with me and I felt pulled to it. So when that happened, spirituality kind of crept in, because I have a very close friend who's very spiritual, and he introduced me to spirituality. And at first, it was a few years before that, and at first I was like, he's very woo-woo. I don't know if he's like crazy, you know what I mean? I would never say that to him at the time, but I would just kind of humor him like, oh yeah, but I didn't believe any of that stuff. It planted a seed in me somewhere, and he sent me a song, Budding Trees by Nako and the Medicine for the People, and then that triggered something in me. He said, this is the first song that I listened to that triggered something in me. And it jostled something just like the other video did. And so then the first experience I had that really brought me to like, whoa, was I was in my room, and I was a very anxious person. I experienced a lot of depression, a lot of anxiety, a lot of dissociation. I experienced depersonalization and derealization as like a baseline of varying degrees. So I was very numb a lot of the time. It was a very miserable existence in that time. But I was having anxiety, and I felt like when I feel a panic attack coming on, it kind of feels like I'm going up, like my brain, like my consciousness is going up, and it's like, oh, and it was going up. And then I heard a voice in my head that wasn't mine. Like, it felt separate. It was something I'd never experienced before. And it just said, do you trust me? And something in me innately said yes, without even like hesitating. And when I said that, it's like some degree of comfort washed over me, and I felt myself go boo down. And suddenly I was just in my room, present, more present than I had been. And it was just quiet. And I was like, what the fuck was that? And that was the first spiritual experience that I had that really made me question, like, there's more than I think there is. And so from there, I started doing research on this stuff, and it was very overwhelming at first, because there's stuff you get into. I mean, there's like soul stuff and spirit, there's reincarnation. These are like baseline things, soul contracts, karma. But then there's like light codes and like grid work and like stuff that's like, if you're just starting off, it sounds like gobbledygook and it sounds way too overwhelming. And I'm like, these people are nuts. Now I certainly don't think that, but at the time I did. And it's something you kind of have to break down brick by brick, because your foundation in your head has been built by everything that you've been conditioned to believe, every experience you've had, how you've interpreted it through the distortions that you've inundated your system with from these experiences, from your external environment, from your family system. And spirituality is kind of like a giant jackhammer that just drills through all that stuff and just breaks it all apart to create room for something new. And that experience can be very, very overwhelming. It was for me. My awakening, actually, it started getting kind of expedited after that. That was like late 2021 when that experience happened. And then by early 2022, I was getting messages and like I was researching a lot. I was researching aliens a lot, because I kept having images of like gray aliens coming into my head, and that used to scare me. I was like, what the hell is this? Like, aliens always scared me. They were like one of my triggers, like just like in horror. I was like, I don't want aliens. Like, they make me feel weird. And then I kind of had to make peace with, I was like, why am I scared of this? I'm going to radically accept that this thing is not going to hurt me, because now in spirituality, I'm learning that nothing wants to hurt you. These things just happen based on what you manifest from what you expect, basically. What you expect to happen and what is possible is kind of what manifests in your reality. Not like exactly, like you're not going to have exactly what you expect to happen, but some manifestation of that energy will show itself in your reality at some point if you continue to be afraid of it, or continue to expect it in a positive way. But conditioning yourself to expect it in a positive way takes a lot of work if you are a traumatized person. And so I worked on that, and then it was just like I just dove super deep in, because now I felt the connection to like my spiritual self, kind of like it felt like almost like reuniting with an old friend. Like something in me came out of survival mode, and I was almost having a conversation, and it was, now I know it was my higher self coming through, my true self. And that felt great, because it was like, oh my God, I missed you. Because it's kind of like meeting your inner child again, where it's like, oh my God, this is who we are. I totally forgot, because I was so focused on trying to survive and the pessimism of the world and being just stuck in a fear matrix. And so in 2022, around June, July, I really, really started seeing synchronicities, a lot of synchronicities, to the point where one night, let me really get into this. So I was in a very high vibrational space. I was discarding a lot of limiting beliefs. I was loving myself. I was discarding a lot of things. I processed a lot. I guess I should go back before that. What happened the year before was I learned how to process through the psychological stuff. I did a little EMDR by myself. I did a lot of journaling, and I started writing poetry. And poetry really helped me start expressing my feelings and understanding myself, because I had never had a creative outlet. And it's actually so important for us as human beings to have a creative outlet for our emotions, because otherwise they get stuck in the nervous system and they affect your thoughts and they affect your feelings, and you feel like shit and you don't know why. So writing poetry really gave me, I like structure, and so it gave me I started with a haiku because very structured, 575. But then I started doing like 4 stanza rhyme schemes, and it just started flowing out of me. It was like a backlog of unprocessed emotion from my entire life started flowing out of me, and that is what opened up the door for spirit to come in, actually, with everything else. But it created the emotional space for me to listen with less distortion. And at the time, it didn't feel like it was crazily releasing anything at the time. I felt a little lighter afterwards. I felt proud, but it didn't like change that much. But the longer I did it and the more it released, the more I was like, oh, I'm like, my baseline reality is a little bit more pleasant. And so as I healed that stuff and processed that stuff, I started to love myself more and dismantle the beliefs that I wasn't good enough or that I was unworthy. And then that really skyrocketed my expansion. And then one day, I had so many synchronicities at this point. I was like very in tune. I was sitting at a park at my friend's because I had actually left the place that I was because I felt that I wasn't being treated right, and I could feel that the person was resentful of me, but she was not vocalizing it. Even though I was brave and talked to her about it, because I was like, if you have any like problems, like please just come to me, because I wasn't paying rent, because I wasn't able to work because of all this mental illness stuff, and they thought I could, and I left after a little spat. And I stayed with my friend in her 1-bedroom apartment with her boyfriend and her child. And her boyfriend was very bad for her, very narcissistic, very, very unintelligent as well, but believed he was logical and intelligent. And it was very hard not to call him out for his idiocy. And I don't want to shit on him for that, but it was just like, oh my God, bro. Like, because he was just hurting her and gaslighting her and making her doubt herself, and it pissed me off. But I was in a park at her complex. I'd been there for about a month. And I just had this moment where suddenly everything around me got quiet. And I looked around and I saw people, and I knew what they were going to do before they did it. Almost like I could decide what they were going to do before they did it. What I expected to happen, that guy's going to walk around in circles for a little bit on his phone. That girl's going to go out to her car. Then it would happen. I was totally in flow with the Tao and my own magician properties as a manifester. All of a sudden, like I was asking to go higher the whole time. I wanted a greater understanding, but this was something that I'd never experienced and never expected to experience. And I was humming a lot. Ever since I started working on myself, I would kind of have this thing where my solar plexus felt very, I would say, buzzy, almost like an internal tickle that like I couldn't turn off, and it was very uncomfortable. So I would and I was doing that like 24/7, so it was very off-putting for some people, and I was very like, self-conscious about it, because I didn't want to make anyone else uncomfortable, and I just wanted to like be able to regulate myself. And so I end up sitting on the ground there, and like swaying back and forth, because it took my perspective like I was an ant. It suddenly swoops me up, and I could see how this is all a game. This is all an illusion. This is all a hologram. I felt like I unlocked the cheat codes to Grand Theft Auto. And they told me, the message was, if you can make it make sense, you can have it. And it rang so true. And so I'm on the ground doing this, like having all these realizations. And then the police show up, and I'm like, this is one of my fears. Like, this is my fear manifesting. This is a test to see how I handle this. And the lady came up, and she was like, are you all right? Or something like that. And I was like, oh, I'm all right. And she was like, I don't think you are. And Spirit told me, you don't even have to make words. Just focus on the emotion and what you want as a result of that from her. And I didn't say words. I don't remember how anything came out of me because I was not using words. But what I expected was then exactly what spawned in real time. She started, and like started listening, and compassion, and it's a blur of how I navigated it, but then it ended with her walking away to the car and me waving at them and them waving back like we're friends. I didn't even, in her vibrational level of reality, I made sense. In this one, I didn't even do shit. It was just completely mental manifestation, expectation, and belief. I was completely in a zone where my understanding of limitation was gone. It was suspended. I thought it was gone forever. It was suspended. So I truly could do anything. It was like literally being in God mode, Christ consciousness. Like being aware that it is a game and that it is a dream, and now I'm lucid dreaming. And so after they left, I remember I walked over to a sign. Everything was also golden. Everything looked very heavenly, very divine. Like there was a tinge of gold to the field I was in. It was just, as opposed to when I was in depersonalization and derealization for all these years, everything looked kind of colorless and dull. This was like the opposite. It was oversaturated and vibrant. And I went over to a sign stuck on a wall, a metal sign that said something, and I was like, I could pull that off, because strength doesn't actually matter in muscle. It just matters what I expect and what I believe in myself. And I ripped that thing off the wall. It took 2 tries. One was a big bend and one was, but I was just like, and looking back, I shouldn't have done that. But at the time, I was proving to myself the space that I was in was not a lie. And I remember sitting there in a field afterwards just being like, oh my God. They showed me that there are 2 polarities of life, love and fear. Hate is not the opposite of love, fear is. And so they said that they were absolving me of fear, or I was learning to manage my fear, because it was a scary experience. It was a very big expansion. It was something that most people, they're telling me at least, don't ever see and don't ever experience. So it was wild. And then the next day I had gone to my friend's in Lansdale. He happenstance showed up, and I ended up going back to his place because at this point I had left, and I was like on my way to being homeless because I had to leave Christina's as well. Oh, name drop. But he let me stay at his place, and during the day there, this is a lot for a first episode, but I stepped outside of linear time. Spirit showed me, they took my consciousness, and like it was 1:42, okay? And then suddenly it was 1:40. And everything that happened at 1:42 didn't happen yet. My drink that I finished wasn't finished yet. And then I would go, this is where I finish it. And I was calm because I was so in this space that everything made sense at the time, because I was fully trusting of Spirit showing me this thing, and I had suspended my logical human brain to just be in the flow of things. And so that bounced around for a little bit, and I was like, I can't believe this is happening. It actually got very like rainbow and like crazy, and I had to burn myself with a lighter. Excuse the rain. I had to burn myself with a lighter to kind of ground myself. Trigger warning, self-harm. I was doing it literally just to ground myself. And then at one point I heard my friend upstairs and downstairs at the same time. I was so like, my manifestation was so crazy that it's like, since anything could happen, it was like shifty. It was very shifty. I was quantum shifting every second. It was like, blah, 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 blah. It was very unstable, because my root chakra, my sacral, my solar plexus were the grounding chakras of the physical body were very unstable. So this was a very overwhelming experience. But that night I left, and I was feeling I was just guided, and it felt like being on a journey, and they told me, you're the traveler. And I'm like, okay, bet. And barring some details, basically around 2 a.m. I looked up at the sky, and the clouds stopped moving and started glitching kind of backwards. And at that point I was like, I think I'm in psychosis, because I know what that is. And I started looking at street signs, and they were like kind of like jumbled, almost like, I don't know, you ever have an Apple Watch and you set it up and it's like this big blob of like swirling little tiny circles? It was like that. And so I called an ambulance and was like, I have to go. Like, I'm experiencing psychosis. And they took me to a hospital, and then the hospital took me to a psych place. And basically during that, crazy things happened. This is the one that, because when you're going through a spiritual awakening of that severity, you need a lot of confirmation that it's not just all in your head. So 3D was showing me a lot of stuff. But the most profound one was, I was in the shower there, naked, alone, in my room, and I had a couple of safe things. The colors teal, purple, and pink were very safe. They were signs. Rainbow was the ultimate sign of safety. I saw a rainbow there the first day out the window. It was beautiful. The whole front of the place was actually covered in rainbows, because it was July and they left it up from Pride Month. So it was like I immediately knew this is where I'm supposed to be, because Spirit sent me here. And I was in the shower alone, and then just out of the corner of my eye, I just see boop, 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 and a rainbow bouncy ball like spawned out of nowhere. And I just picked it up and was like, of course, thank you. Like, a real tangible thing, because I kept checking in with myself, like, am I losing time? Am I confused? And like, no, I was completely lucid and aware, and there it was just I was in such a high vibration that mystical things were happening to me because I was drawing them in and I wanted to experience them, even though it was very overwhelming. I was buzzing like crazy. My whole body felt like it was on like electric. Now I know that that was kind of my Kundalini awakening. It hurt too, like in my back. And I was very manic. I could not sleep. It was just such an overwhelming influx of energy and information all the time. But that's the gist of the first part of my awakening. It was very explosive as in terms of how quick it ramped up after those months of exploring it. And I ended up, I'll go back into more of it later, but I just want to talk about how everyone's awakening is different, and it's not just one awakening. That was like my first like ascension and expansion, where I really realized and felt the divinity within myself. I felt at that time like it suspended my ego, and I was just this divine essence in a being. And I remembered that I was that divine essence. Crosses became so significant. Yeshua worked with me immediately, and I didn't think he was real before. I didn't think he was real. Then suddenly I'm drawing crosses on everything. I'm carving crosses into my flip-flops at the psych ward, and I'm like, it just feels like a compulsion. The Bible felt so significant, and I never had even believed in Christianity. I thought it was all gobbledygook. And suddenly it was just so important to me, and I felt like the presence of God. It felt like, I remember describing it as, I feel like I have a direct line all the way up, is what it was. It felt like the one creator, infinite consciousness source was channeling directly to me, supporting me, guiding me, and was me. But at the time, it didn't feel like it. I still felt like a fractal. Now, after a bunch more of ascensions and expansions, I'm like, oh, fuck, that's me. Just with way less distortions, because I'm being funneled into a human body, so I have to have these perceived limitations to experience this perspective of reality without being overwhelmed like I was then. Because once you remove the walls, it would qualify as psychosis, but psychosis is seen as a detachment from reality, but that's looking at reality as an external force that is concrete. This is more like all of the filters that make reality digestible, that filter you from like focusing on your desires, focusing on your emotions, focusing on what you like, little like pigeonhole tunnel vision, to suddenly this expansive, no holds barred, explosive, everything is possible space. And that's what was overwhelming, because suddenly I wasn't limited, I was limitless. And when you can do anything, that's a lot. So I actually moved to Portland with my friend about a week after I got out of the psych ward, after some other questionable shit. I was bouncing around a little bit, and I went out there and had many profound experiences with spirit and channeling, and luckily it was the same friend that introduced me to spirituality, so he was my grounding totem, basically telling me you're not crazy, because the big part of spiritual awakening often is, am I crazy? Is this real? Am I going cuckoo bananas? And that's fear. That's fear and self-doubt. And so after about 2 months of that, I moved in with this other guy who I'd met on Tumblr years ago and said I could live with him because I couldn't stay with Tim for that long. Oh, name drop, whatever. Couldn't stay with him for that long. And when I left, it kind of like robbed me of that sense of safety of him. Like I was looking to him as an external force of safety because I couldn't find it within myself, because again, my energy was so all over the place and I had not worked through everything to build a foundation yet, because I couldn't have. This was like the foundation destructor. And when I moved in with him, it's like I started losing it. And it was like I went into an episode of depersonalization and derealization, the likes of which I had never been in before. I'd been in it multiple times, about 3 times, and it's a horrible space to be in because it doesn't feel like you're a person. It feels like you're a husk. It feels like you're stuck in your brain ruminating. It doesn't feel, you feel no emotions. Time is distorted, perception is distorted, everything tastes bad, everything smells bad, nothing's comforting, it's awful. And I went into that space on top of feeling psychotic, because now I'm like, I'm in this space, I don't know anything, and was that even real? And I was suicidal, like trigger warning. I was suicidal because I was like, I can't experience this pain. I can't go through this again. I literally am not going to do this. Every moment is torturous. It was hell. It was literally like the hell vibration. I was at the lowest of the low. And it was inescapable, because the only thing that heals it is time, I learned. And so when every moment is excruciating, time feels like it goes very slow. And I remember, this is a very big trigger warning, but I asked my friend at one point, I was like, can I use your gun? Because I can't do this. And that was a serious point in my life where I was like, wow, like, fuck. And he said no. He said no. But I eventually moved back from Portland a few months later too, because my friend said that he would let me stay with him. And that was when I started to feel a little better. But I remember a moment in time in my head saying to myself, we have to look at this experience as psychosis right now to feel okay. We can process that later. And so I did that. And I was with him for about a month, and then, or 2 months? Maybe 3 months. It was until like June, and then I moved in with these other people, someone I met on World of Warcraft. And that was, at this point, Spirit was not speaking to me. There was no connection. I mean, the connection's always there, but I was not, I had kind of gone all the way up, and then I went all the way down, and then I was slowly, but I still couldn't really discern. I had lost my rational thinking. It was like suspended, so I couldn't determine what was likely to happen, and that made me feel very unsafe all the time. It felt like being a little baby in the world and not being able to take care of yourself, not being able to navigate. It was very scary. And I remember just cursing God, being like, why would you show me such beauty and such intense magic and then take it away? What the fuck is this? And over time, I learned that I had to go through some more lessons, because though my ego was suspended during that, there was a lot of trauma and self-belief that I had not worked all the way through, that I thought I had because I had gone to that space. But it was still in my brain. They just had to basically show me that this is very real, and now go finish working through this shit so you can truly start being who you're meant to be. And so I spent a year and a half there kind of being gaslit, being emotionally abused, being filled with self-doubt by someone that I loved very much there, the person that let me stay with them. And I had put myself aside the entire time because I saw this being hurting, saying no one understands me, I don't feel loved, I don't feel trusted. But every time I tried to do something to do that with them, they would push me away and hurt me verbally. But they didn't believe it was hurtful, so they would say that I was being too sensitive or that I had it wrong. This is the same person that sees the aura, so that added a lot of context to it, because since he sees aura, he thought he knew what I was feeling better than I did. And it just made me doubt myself a lot. And then I learned later, when eventually I stood up to him, that was earlier this year. This is actually what propelled me into my second ascension, was choosing myself in this situation. I had suddenly, my connection started to come back a bit, and I started hearing archangels. And when I say hearing, it's like a mind thought just different than mine. I don't have clairaudience. I don't like hear, but it's like I'm getting the messages and I know that it's coming from this thing. Usually I know where it's coming from. Sometimes I don't. It's just like spirit general. But, and they were telling me, they started showing up. I started channeling from videos. They started showing me these videos of channelers, of tarot readers and stuff on YouTube related to my situation. Like, this video found you at the right time. And when I turned closed captioning on, random words would be capitalized. And I started writing down the words that were capitalized, and they ended up being messages that were telling me where to go and what to do, which felt very amazing that the angels would guide me in that way. I kind of just stumbled into it. I mean, I was guided, but I didn't know what I was being guided into. And they told me to detach from this person, because I had already removed myself, because I started regulating my nervous system more and reminding myself of this. And it's like, when my nervous system doesn't feel safe around this person, maybe it's not me, maybe it's him, because I had seen him harm people around him as well. I would say not intentionally most of the time, but sometimes when he felt hurt, he intentionally would harm because he felt like he needed vengeance. Like, he was a person that only experienced cognitive empathy and not real empathy. And actually, we determined later that he's most likely a psychopath or a sociopath. Like, he admitted, like, he was like, all these signs, this is how I feel, and went very deep into his childhood and things, experience he had. And I'm like, oh my God, that checks all the boxes. This is why you are the way you are. And I started to detach from him because he started pulling away and being angry at me because of a situation that unfolded where, I'll be very honest here, he had opened me up to cocaine. When I was in that low place, I just wanted to feel better, and he sold the stuff. And so I started doing that regularly with him because he gave it to me for free. And he liked it because it would open me up more and take me to a higher place where my conversations with him were more intellectually stimulating, because he was an extremely intellectual person. One of the smartest people, if not the smartest person I've ever met personally, which made him very good at manipulating people, because he thought he wasn't manipulating people. Like, consciously, he would try not to manipulate people. Like, he was really trying to be good, but it would still happen. And so he got enjoyment out of the fact that someone could finally intellectually stimulate him enough to, like, be engaged in that way. And then when I would do it with him and I wouldn't be in that space because it was a hit or miss with drugs, man, he would be upset with me, like, and he'd be like, sometimes you're this great thing and blah, 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 and other times you're just like nothing. And I'm just like, I don't like being in this space just as much as you do, probably more. So I had started chipping off little bits of it sometimes when he wasn't there, which I felt terrible about because I'm not a person that ever wants to steal. I don't ever want to hurt anyone. I don't ever want to betray my friends. But cocaine is a hell of a drug. And I would just one line. Oh, just a few lines for later today. He won't notice and it's fine. And that happened for months. So I estimated probably about 25 to 30 times. Who knows if that's right. But at some point, one day, he called me his best friend. And that shook me. I was like, I have to go. And I went to the store and I was getting messages like, you have to tell him now. You have to be okay with detaching. You have to be okay with the fact that you may lose this place that you're living and I didn't have a job, still don't. Like, you might not know where you're going to go. You might lose everything, but this is killing you inside to be lying to him and like betraying him, his trust, even though he did a lot of stuff to me all the time, but two wrongs don't make it right. So when I got home, I was like, I need to tell you something. And I was trying to regulate myself and stuff, but they were like, it's time. And I'm like, okay. And I told him. He took it very well at the time, although he was very calm. He was very eerie in the fact that he was like, well, you don't know what I'm going to do or what I'm going to say, so I'm going to let you stew for a little. And I'm like, this is actually kind of crazy that you would say that to me and then also like leave me in this space, but you want me to hurt because I hurt you. But anyway, regardless of that, which I've never taken anything from anyone again. Like I hated myself every time I did that, but I had to forgive myself for that because it's one of the most addictive substances, and I didn't mean any harm by it. It was just a lack of willpower and wanting to feel okay, because it was very physically uncomfortable for me as well in my body. That humming I talked about in my solar plexus was crazy, and I felt like morning to night I was doing it, and I never felt at ease in my body. And sometimes doing that would make me feel at ease in my body. So it was like I was very drawn to it, not just for like the effects from everyone else, but just the fact that it calmed my nervous system. So that formed a very big addiction. But so when I was there, then over the next few weeks, he became more and more hostile and resentful. I could feel the energy, and he would deny the energy and say, I wasn't slamming stuff, I wasn't doing that. And I'm like, yes, you absolutely were. Stop gaslighting me. I wouldn't say that. But I kept educating myself, reminding myself about gaslighting, looking up all these things. And I finally, at one point, after detaching and talking to him, stood up the one time when he was trying to tell me about a situation that I was in that he was not present for. And he was trying to basically prove that I was not being compassionate or thinking about certain people's feelings because I was too focused on someone else. And I was like, I did think about their feelings, and he was just gaslighting me, saying I didn't, even though he wasn't there. It was crazy. And so when I finally just was like, it seems we disagree, it like made him spiral when I would not bend to his will and reframe my framework of reality to what he was saying. He started getting very angry and very upset, and like I remained calm, and that threw him for a loop because I would always shrink myself and just like apologize. And I was like, no, like this is just, we don't agree. And he's like, this is like a logical fallacy. Like, what do you mean? Like, and when he was leaving, this is a moment I remember, he said, I don't like the way you're looking at me right now, and I don't like the way your aura looks. And that moment I knew, I'm like, he feels vulnerable. He feels exposed. I'm seeing him for who he is, not the distortions that I was projecting onto him, where he's just only this good thing and he's just trying to figure out how to be good, and all the other things are just, he's had a hard time, he doesn't know how to do it. I stopped making excuses and was just like, no, you're harmful and you're gaslighting me and I will not stand for it. And then he left for work because he was leaving for work at that time. He had to leave. And then he called me like 10 minutes later and just started word salading on the phone. Like he was just distraught. Like I made him spiral by standing in my own power. And when I went back to my room, I started second guessing. I was like, did I do was everything I'm saying right? And I have a howlite stone that I use to commune with the angels. And it just went and moved like 6 inches across my flat desk. And I was like, okay, this is what I was waiting for. The manifestations and the physical confirming this stuff. Like I shouldn't need them all the time, but... And then that led to a few days later him being like, you need to get out. I can't have people in my house that steal stuff, da 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 da. which was ironic because before he said that, he said people would borrow money from him or steal from him or something, and then they would detach from him and block him. And he's like, that's just money. Like, I don't care about that. I care about people's friendship, and I just wish I could maintain the relationship and they would just say what they did and we could heal it. And then when I did that, that's not what happened. He started lashing out. And eventually the one day, this is like really getting into, I guess this is spiritual and psychological, but this is personal. He was very drunk and very high on cocaine and was just berating me coming into my room, because my room was just the front living room with a curtain in between like the door frame. And he would just come in and just slur at me and just saying, you gotta go, you got 3 days, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, okay. And he's like, you're not even looking for anything to... And I'm like, I knew I was divinely guided. I knew what was going to happen regardless. So I was chilling. And he seemed hurt by the fact that I wasn't more hurt. But in my mind, I had already detached from him over the past like 2 weeks because I'd felt hurt. And because in all these channelings I was being guided, confirmed already what I felt was that detached from him, he's not good for you. You've learned the lessons from him. He has nothing more to teach you. And so I did that. And so when I wasn't being emotionally like trying to cling to him and bend to his will and basically stay in this relationship, and it wasn't romantic, it was just, but it was a very, very, very intimate friendship. Still to this day, I don't think I've gotten deeper with anyone, which is hard to think about, but he just started getting angrier and angrier, and eventually it led to the point where I left. I was like, I'm just gonna go. And he was still talking shit the whole time, and I left. And it was winter, it was February, it was very cold. And I went to the corner store and I was like, I don't know what I'm gonna do. And then he called me and he was like, I was just driving all over looking for you, where are you? And I'm like, you're super drunk and you have like 2 or 3 DUIs, like what are you doing? And he was like, come back, I'll leave you alone, like I'll just get your stuff back. And I was like, and I had a feeling at the time, I'm like, okay, but then I still had a feeling, I heard a tinge at the end of it where I was like, he's still gonna be doing things that are harmful. I don't think he's gonna follow through with this. So I had an inclination, an intuitive moment of calling a friend who said if I ever needed to get away, I could call him. And I called him on the way back from the store to the house, and he was at a casino, but he said he would leave to come get me because I told him the situation, which was very kind of him. He was a very good friend. And I get back to the house, and lo and behold, he does not leave me alone. And something is telling me, just gather all your spiritual stuff, the stuff that really means something to you, and get out. And so he's talking his shit, I'm gathering my stuff, and then I'm like, I'm gonna go. And he's like, you will have to physically restrain me to walk out that door. And at this point, I'm like, because it's like, wow, is this a lifetime? Like, am I about to like fucking die? Because he said he was going to hit me earlier, and then he said he was going to rob me. And at one point before that, he said he wasn't afraid to kill me. And so that was, so I yelled. I literally just yelled because there were other people in the house, but this was like an isolating incident where no one knew what was happening. And his brother came down, and I eventually got out the door. I ran. He ran in the street after me, starts saying more shit, getting real close, scaring me, very intimidating, and just berating me, saying how much do you think I spent on you? How much, like I was some kind of investment that wasn't paying off, like I'm not a human being. He saw me as a project, is what the energy was, like, and now I'm a project that's not paying off after all this time, so he's furious at losing his investment. And eventually, thank God, after like 20 minutes of that, he went inside and was like, I hope you got all your shit because I'm burning the rest of it. And then my friend pulled up about 5 minutes later, and I was like, I got in that car and I never looked back. And ever since then, I have been divinely guided and expanding and ascending and experiencing levels of consciousness that I did not know. Again. But this time I have a solid foundation of trusting and choosing myself and knowing that I can take care of myself regardless of the external situation, which manifests situations that are better. But it shows sometimes that until we learn to choose ourselves, truly choose ourselves, and stop staying in these relationships where we are being harmed, but we're making excuses and not standing in our power, we're going to keep manifesting those things until we decide to walk away. And it was scary, but it was empowering. And I needed guidance to get through that, but it was all me. They were showing me that I had the power the entire time. And that's what the spiritual journey is. It's remembering that you are a limitless, multidimensional being, a fractal of the infinite consciousness of the universe. And so I did have to learn psychology stuff about gaslighting and this and that. We're in a time where luckily people that ascended before only had word of mouth and books and stuff. Now it's like we have the internet, so I got all the information I needed to kind of expedite this process, because it's only been 3 years since the first experience, and like I've gone through a shit ton of stuff. But this time, they told me it's different. That was literally a message, like it's different this time. And Now, I guess I'm saying all this, I guess, to give a backstory for the first thing to know where I stand on spirituality, because now I get messages, I've had psychic gifts unlock, I've had telepathic encounters, I've talked to spirits, to deceased people that came to me. Like, it was just stuff that, like, once you remove the limiting beliefs in your mind by processing and taking in information that makes you understand in a way that makes it seem possible, then those events start showing up and manifesting in your reality, and you realize nothing's off limits. Now, it's hard sometimes to manifest because you don't realize what's blocking you until you dig deep and look into it, and it's very uncomfortable to look inward and see that stuff. But the more you push through that discomfort to find the truth, the more powerful you feel, and the more you love yourself, really, because you're like, I'm doing the damn thing. I can do whatever I want. I'm doing amazing, and I'm not better than anyone else, because we're not going to compare here. We're all of the same thing, just in different little suits. But I like who I am, and I like who I'm becoming, and I understand that everything that has happened to me has made me who I am, and every decision I made or perceived as a mistake or failure was just a stepping stone or a redirection to the person that I am today, because this is who I had to be to bring whatever I need to bring into the world. That's my mission, my purpose, my creative endeavor, because we're here to be creators and bring that which does not exist into existence, to bring balance, to raise the vibration of the planet by treating each other with respect, compassion, dignity, understanding, and like a consciousness of unity. And just learning how to be, and not learning how to just be a human doing, and learning how to be a human being and finding presence in the now moment. So it's a lot. I know that was a lot, and that's just a summary of my journey, the big points in it. But spirituality is a multifaceted and very extra-dimensional affair that you need stepping stones to get to sometimes. Some people don't. Like, if you're a child and you get it, and you have a supportive family, like if you were in the olden times where there were shaman and stuff, you might be recognized for your gifts early and kind of taken into like school for it, like by mystics, and trained in it and honing it, and you don't ever learn to hate yourself or suppress your gifts. You're just in tune from day one. Other people like me, they have to go through a lot of trauma first, and then unearthing that trauma for us to open our minds to the possibilities, and then unlocking our spiritual gifts. And they're telling me I still have more stuff to unlock. I'm not even like, I got plenty of stuff coming. So, and I don't know what it is, but I learned to have trust and faith in the universe and myself. There's a little confirmation train that everything is happening exactly as it should. Everything's unfolding exactly as it should. And that helps me through hard periods where I'm homeless, I'm experiencing homelessness right now. I try not to say I'm homeless. I'm experiencing homelessness. I'm recording this in a tent on my iPhone that I'll update later from the library or the Wendy's. But it's taught me that I am very resilient, and in the face of a situation that most people would crumble under, I use my faith and my know-how and my connection to survive, not only survive, but cultivate a positive mindset and still expect good things and receive blessings and love myself, because it's just an external situation that's trying to teach me something. So faith can come in very handy for these things when you understand that it's all falling into place exactly as it should. Even if your ego is screaming, this is wrong, I hate it, I hate it, I hate it, there's that thing in the back of your mind. Doesn't make it feel that much better at the time, but it eases it a little bit. So I don't really know where to go from here. I guess I wanted to get into my backstory, so there was a basic understanding of where I'm at and what I'm speaking from, and what's speaking through me. So, yeah. I guess this will be the stepping stone, the jumping off point for other topics when I want to talk about specific things like that I've glossed over in this, like projection and narcissism and internalized beliefs and trauma, but also like spiritual things like deities and frequency, energy, resonance, vibration, awakening, expanding consciousness, all gifts, all kinds of stuff like that. And I want each episode to have a specific point so I can stay in my lane and not tangent off. Like, this one wasn't really a tangent, but it does have a lot of layers to it, and a lot of information that I excluded just because I experienced a lot in a very short period of time, many of these times. So that's my story, a little synopsis of the surface level of my lore and what I want this thing to be about. So I guess I'm going to be brave and fight my perfectionist impulses and upload it. And if you liked it, I guess let me know. I guess I'm going to upload this to YouTube first before I upload it on other platforms. So leave a comment if this has resonated or something. I don't know. I'm new to podcasts. Like and subscribe, I guess. I don't know. Fuck. Thank you for being here. If you've listened this long, though, I appreciate you. And just know that you are loved and you are loved. Have a wonderful day.